were in revival here for a few years in the late 1990s, we constantly go up to Kelowna and be in the presence of God. And Josie would know, she was in Toronto with the Toronto Blessing. You go to these meetings and the presence of God was so strong and so thick, it's almost like you feel like you could touch it. It was like syrup, right? When we want to receive from the Holy Spirit, we need to realize that it's more than just proximity. So let's explain what that means. If I'm sitting on the couch with my wife watching sports, I'm close to her on the couch, but we're not interacting, right? So if we're on the couch and I'm sitting here and she's sitting there, or if in Corinne's case, she's sitting here and George is sitting here, if we're sitting there, we're close to each other, but we're not actually interacting, right? And if I think, well, we're close to each other, it's not going to do what needs to happen, which is interaction, to be really close people, to be really close. People go into a church building and they feel the presence of God. They feel the proximity, and it's wonderful, but how you interact with God is what is really produced in your life. And I'm going to explain to that something that probably I would venture to guess, I'm taking a guess, maybe somebody's heard this, but the teaching I shared tonight, I've never heard. Right? So it's something that probably most of us have never heard because we've overlooked some of these things or we just didn't get the revelation. So we're going to go into 2 Samuel 6 as well as 1 Chronicles 13:15 because they kind of mirror the same thing. In 2 Samuel 6, a man named Abinadab, when the presence of God arrives at his house, through the Ark of the Covenant coming into his house, and it rests there for about 40 years during all of the reign of Saul. So we're going to compare two things. We're going to compare Abinadab under the reign of Saul, the ark in his house, and then Obed-Edom in the reign of David, and what happens in 3 months of the ark being there, and then thereafter what David starts to see and carries through his reign. So in 2 Samuel 6, a man named Abinadab, when the presence of God arrives at his house, through the Ark of the Covenant coming into his house, and it rests there for about 40 years during all the reign of Saul. It was there even before the battle of Mizpah, and so it rested at his house for years. But we don't see one recorded miracle nor one recorded blessing ever happening. So we're going to see two completely parallel situations, but not only a king, but a family that treated it very differently. What you see is inappropriate interaction, and we know that because of what happened with Uzzah. From what the son of Abinadab did, is he stretched his hand out in irreverence. And that is what happened when he did that. It killed him, right? The word irreverence is actually used there, and he touched the Ark of the Covenant, and in that we see the problem. There was being produced in the house of Abinadab an irreverence for the presence of God. There wasn't the honor. We know that because Uzzah had them handle the ark the same way the Philistines did. So they treated the ark the same way the Philistines, which represented the world. Right? The world they don't care about the presence of God. They don't even know about the presence of God. They certainly don't treat God with honor. They certainly don't seek after God. Right? So you have this ark there for 40 years, approximately. And at no point does that family really have a heart for God and for the presence of God. So there was being produced in the house of Abinadab an irreverence for the presence of God. There wasn't the honor. We know that because Uzzah had them handle the ark the same way the Philistines did. But God has specifically told the children of Israel to carry the ark in a certain way. And I truly believe why God was so specific in the protocol on how to handle the ark is that it was a shadow of how we're to handle his presence. God told them to carry the ark upon their shoulders. So you've got 4 priests, 2 at the front, 2 at the back, poles going down the sides of the ark. The ark has got rings that the poles go through, and they're carrying it. Now, the poles are not very long. The ark is basically almost right at my back, and if I'm at the back carrying, it's right at my front. So the presence of God was meant to be something that you carry close to you. God wasn't to be distant, he was to be close. It was to be carried by priests, which are those who have a relationship and a covenant with God. Those who are close to God. Those who are walking in holiness. Those who minister to God and seek him daily. We were meant to carry the weightiness of his presence and to know what it was to stand and to walk under the weightiness of his glory and his presence. So when they put it on this cart, they made a new cart, which is interesting, as they took the time, the energy, and resources to make a cart, but they did it in the same way that the Philistines did instead of the way God instructed. So how many times do we do things like the world does? Even nowadays, I'm going to build my church on programs. I'm going to build my church on coffee and donuts. I'm going to build my church on everything except for what God has told us to do. Right? Let's make it seeker sensitive, right? Let's do whatever. But have we actually taken time to look at and say, God, what do you want me to do? The church has to be centered on the presence of God. If you look at the way that the 12 tribes of Israel were situated in the nation of Israel, where was the tabernacle of Moses located? And so the 12 tribes are like this. Where was the tabernacle situated? Sorry?
Was it in the north?
No. Right dead center. Right? Right dead center. Which means that all of them had equal ability to get to the presence, and number one, and number two, it was at the core of everything that they were about. Everything in church has to be about this. The center of why we gather, the center of what we do, the center of how we function, the center of how we minister, the center of everything has to be the presence of God. Right? When we did the last conference, one of the reasons we saw a manifestation of his glory where people got saved and got baptized in the Holy Spirit was because the presence of God came, and when it comes, it's going to have results. It's going to bear fruit. Right? So much so that if you took a stick and stick a stick in the Old Testament, the stick itself would blossom, which is what happened with the rod of Aaron. Right? So we were meant to, trying to see where I was, we were meant to carry the weightiness of his presence and to know what it was to stand and to walk into the weightiness of his glory and his presence. So when they put it on this cart, oh yeah, that's what I said. And a lot of us want the presence of God, but we don't want to abide by the way to walk by the protocol of handling God's presence. I mean, if you want results, you've got to do it the way he's lined it up, and it's actually easier his way than the other way around, right? With his way, there's rest. Our way, there's a whole bunch of work, right? And you see it in all the different religions, you know, pour dust on yourself, cut yourself, you know, go do this, go build that. With him, it just come, accept Christ, which is a free gift, come and spend time with me. I mean, how easy is that, right? So God never killed the Philistines for handling his presence in a wrong way, right? Isn't it funny how when Ananias and Sapphira were taken out, it's not like God took out the people outside the church, right? You never see, so you don't see God taking out the Philistines for how they handle it, right? When the real presence of God comes into a meeting, he makes an amateur of you in seconds, as you can be a seasoned preacher, but when the glory comes, we should step back and let him lead, right? I mean, if anybody knows how to make an entrance, if anybody knows how to draw glory to Jesus, right? If anybody knows what they're doing, it's him, right? So the ark is in the house of Abinadab for probably around 40 years, and there are no recorded miracles and no recorded blessings. But when it goes into the house of Obed-Edom for 3 months, so in one it's 40 years, the other one is 3 months. It multiplies everything so much that it caught the attention of King David, which means that so much was multiplied and so many miracles happened that everybody around them took notice, and word kept spreading all the way up till it caught the ear of King David in 3 months. But yet this other family, right? But it's not just a family. You see that this leader, Saul, and the spirit over that whole region stopped them from both honoring God and seeking his presence. And now you have a different spirit operating through David, which is why it's important to be careful of the leadership. And that whole personality and that spirit completely changed in only 3 months. Word spread from those close to the ark all the way to the house of the king, as the blessings were clearly seen and quite significant. The Ark of the Covenant rested almost the entire time in the house of Abinadab for the entire reign of Saul, and if there was recorded miracles or blessings with the type of king that Saul was, don't you think that he would pursue the Ark of the Covenant to get the miracles and blessing for himself? Absolutely, because you know who Saul's God was? Who was Saul's God? Exactly, right? He's the kind of guy that you gather in a meeting like this and you sing the song, "It's All About Me," and he's talking about himself, right? Right? I mean, Saul was a man of the flesh. He was a man that loved having people look at him and go, "Look how tall, look how handsome, look how strong you are," right? The heart of the people were like the heart of the leader and nation, cold towards the presence of God, which is one of the reasons we don't see that there was any recorded blessings nor miracles. But then it's in the house of Obed-Edom